Chapter 7, Excerpts from Alpha City Life. A growing and marked separation occurred between the resort aspects of Alpha City and the resident society that was developing alongside it. Income from guests covered resort expenses, but profit was now used to expand the resident side of this project. Facilities to internally produce textile, wood, metal, and plastic products, as well as electronic components, were planned and built. The residents became skilled at fashioning and manufacturing the products used regularly in daily life. Everyone became jack of all trades. However, everyone also had their special talents, areas where they enjoyed a particular expertise, and this was utilized effectively. The resort guests were able to freely explore the resident areas of Alpha City as well as the resort proper. This became just as popular as the resort attractions. The resident community had its own special charm, and guests could mingle with other residents and get a first-hand feel of their cooperative community lives. Guests could also visit and tour all of the resident production facilities and even choose to participate, getting a hands-on experience in producing some of the many products fashioned on site. We learned this from the writings of a resident. Quote, "There are some excellent resident cooks here, talented in the culinary arts. They are always experimenting with new ideas and styles to the delight of guests and residents. Of course, I don't particularly care for everything I've had, but I never go hungry, and my appreciation for various types of cuisine has expanded. There are many situations where residents prepare meals to share with other residents or even guests. I often get invites to share a dish. Some people just love to cook, and in this atmosphere, it doesn't cost them anything except time. Sometimes several residents prepare something that gets passed around and judged by the other participants and general diners. There are useful and comic critiques of the various dishes, voting takes place, and awards are handed out with lots of laughs and a great deal of lively conversation. I've even seen instances where a guest will even choose to participate as one of the chefs. And it's interesting how many returning guests end up choosing to spend more and more of their stay mingling with the residents rather than enjoying the famous attractions that the resort side offers." End quote. And here's an excerpt of a guest of Alpha City corresponding with a friend. Quote, "I thought these on-site apartments were going to be like dormitories or something. You know, real communal living where 2 or 3 or 4 people share a common room, a kitchen, and a bath with private bedrooms off the common room. But that is not even close. These are private, wonderful apartments. I've included some pictures. Each complex is unique and themed to some degree. The architectural styling is different. The shapes and angles are different. The layouts are different. The color themes are different. The entire landscape is different. Each one is like walking into another world. As a resident, I would have a hard time deciding which one to live in. I guess the residents feel the same way as well because apparently there's a great deal of mobility between the different complexes. Many residents freely move to different complexes every so often for a change of pace. It's a great place to live as a young single person. However, there are also residences designed to accommodate families as well. If you have a family, your children are bused to the surrounding local schools. Everything is so clean and well kept. Residents take a great deal of pride, ownership, and responsibility for this environment of theirs. I want to live here." End quote. Another guest writes, quote, "You would love this. These people design and make their own clothing. They have a modern facility with every imaginable tool or piece of equipment for cutting, sewing, tailoring, seaming, patching, and customizing pretty much anything. You would be in seventh heaven here. It is so awesome. They started out making all the souvenir stuff like t-shirts, shorts, sweatshirts, baseball caps, things like that, with the Alpha City Resort logo on them. And you can buy these things in the resort, but like I said, most of them now make all of their own personal clothing. If you go over to the resident side of this place, they let you tour the textile facility, and they'll even let you try creating something for yourself. They make it so easy. Each entire process is laid out for anything you might want to do: slacks, tops, jackets, basically anything. Someone experienced like you would be right at home here. But even I found it relatively easy and quick to produce my own custom sweatshirt. I just followed along with each clearly designed step, and voila, I ended up with a cool sweatshirt. Well, maybe the process isn't all that easy, maybe for you, but I wouldn't say it was all that difficult either, even for me. Anyway, I can't wait to show it to you. They've got buttons, beads, snaps, Velcro, adhesives, etc. And you can choose from cotton, polyester, macron, wool, nylon, silk, acetate, and who knows what else. And they have different types and colored dyes in these big vats from which you can create your own custom colors. There are racks full of things people choose not to keep or have discarded. Some really nice stuff. Any resident who fancies something can just take it. After the residents have had their chance, these items are moved to a guest rack, and then guests are free to take them. End quote. Another vacationing guest writes this home to a friend. Quote, "There's an impressive woodworking facility in the resident section for residents to produce things they need or want. The facility is stocked with most everything needed to build any sort of wood item you can think of: small figurines, plaques, picture frames, furniture, skis, even musical instruments if you have the skill. There are residents here who have made their own guitars. Some of the components, like the machine heads, frets, and special woods, have to be purchased off-site, but the construction is done entirely at the facility. There are drills, lathes, various adhesives, fasteners, clamps, etc., and they have a variety of finishes available: varnishes, stains, and paints that are dispensed from large sealed vats. It's very high-tech. You can create the color or shade you want on a computer and input the square footage of the surface you need to cover, along with other pertinent information like the material or type of wood you're covering, and it calculates what vats to access and in what quantities. There's very little waste in regard to time and materials." End quote. One of the residents writes this to an outside friend. Quote, "You should consider applying for residency here. They're opening up a small metalworking facility. With your background in steel mills, I'm sure you'd be considered an asset to the workforce. You'd be molding, shaping, and processing metals for various tools and uses throughout the facility. I've worked a bunch of different positions since I've been here. Specialization isn't considered a primary strategy like in the outside world. They use specialization in certain instances, but augment it with a great deal of versatility and diversity. They're looking for people who are committed to this kind of environment. That's the most important thing, and I think you'd fit in very well." I keep saying they like there's some elite corporate management that is running the show, and although I guess that is true to some extent, the atmosphere is far more like a group effort. Instead of they and their way of doing things, it feels more like we and our way of doing things. We're not referred to as employees anymore, but as residents. And because of that, people tend to go the extra mile and help out where they can, even when they aren't working a shift. There is ample opportunity to try whatever you want. Residents are constantly moving around and trying different jobs, helping to train each other as they go. Those who are proficient help those who are new." End quote. This last correspondence shows a shift taking place within Alpha City, from a hierarchy of management employee to one of group consensus, where everyone is on a more or less equal footing. This began to be more and more important as the society became increasingly cooperativist in nature. A resident now explains one of the group projects. Quote, "Several residents had a desire to play billiards. There were no billiard tables in Alpha City at this time, so as a group, we researched how billiard tables were constructed. We obtained as many of the materials as we could from within Alpha City and then purchased the rest from outside sources. We volunteered our time and labor fashioning the billiard table. The equipment and tools needed for this were already available at the various on-site facilities. Of course, there were many mistakes and redos, but overall the experience was very exciting and satisfying, and really quite fun. When it was finally finished, we had our first table, and there was a tremendous feeling of accomplishment, not just individually, but as a group. Each of us designed and fashioned our own cue sticks at the woodworking facility. As the project progressed, others would find out about it and ask to join in and help out. So the initial group grew. And before the first table was done, many of the members began a second table. And having learned from the trials and tribulations involved in making the first table, the second table came together in far less time than the first, and the quality improved. At present, we have 3 completed tables and a 4th on the way. The group or club has grown and now has many members who spend a lot of time there. Now that this group or club is established, outsiders who may have always wanted to try billiards have an opportunity to do so without having to build their own table or even their own cue stick. Many of the regular members have a collection and are more than willing to let newcomers borrow them. At first, the tables were set up in one of the resident lounges, but soon after we established this new activity, and once it was obvious that it had a great deal of resident interest, the construction and building sector of the workforce, in which a bunch of us happened to be participating at that time, was requisitioned to build a billiard hall as a resident facility. Now this activity is enjoyed by residents and guests alike, and more tables are being built and added as its popularity increases. Table tennis enthusiasts have done the same thing for their sport. In fact, they did it before we did. That's what gave us the idea." End quote. There's a tremendous amount of correspondence documented of residents proudly relating the personal satisfaction they felt after fashioning their own equipment or artifacts for whatever particular pastime they enjoyed. We see numerous accounts of, "I made my first tennis racket today," or "I made my first pair of football cleats today," or "last week I made my own set of acrylic paints, brushes, easels, and 5 new canvases for my oil painting." Musical instruments, special equipment for sports, art supplies, circuitry for electronic gaming enthusiasts, cooking utensils for the culinary arts, and other necessities for a variety of leisure activities were being handmade by those in groups or clubs where members shared interests. The proficiency of the residents improved over time to where the quality of these products were competitive with similar products produced in the outside world. This was significant because eventually Alpha City needed to expand its sources of income. As the residents started to outnumber the guests, revenue gained from guests would no longer be sufficient to support this expanding, growing community. Various resident-produced products were being explored and considered for sale off-site to the surrounding community and eventually to the general Belgian public. Over time, this even led to international sales. Residents began adapting and refining their production procedures to accommodate the larger quantities needed for off-site sales. One of John Chandler's grandchildren, Martin Chandler, now a senior and core league member, explains this change further. Quote, "Alpha City had come a long way, but was still and would always be, to a greater or lesser degree, dependent on outside industries, and this would always cost money. It was never the League's goal to isolate Alpha City from the rest of the world, but to create a unique sub-society within the mainstream society, serving to demonstrate what could be achieved and what life would look like when people were willing to cooperate and pool resources to create a community in which individuals were free from internal commerce and personal expenses. Residents began producing a wide variety of high-quality products that were versatile and durable. Production overhead was low in comparison to outside competitors due to no labor costs. Additionally, Alpha City was able to attain much of its materials at cost, either from Gray Gone affiliates or buying in bulk, so products could be competitively priced, undercutting outside producers by a significant margin without sacrificing quality. End quote. Alpha City products rapidly gained a very favorable reputation and soon were in demand. Over time, they became a best-selling brand, not only domestically but internationally as well. The residents began to set up avenues for outside markets, which provided the funding needed for further expansions. Products progressed beyond tennis rackets and skateboards to complex circuitry boards and electric motors. As the size of the resident population grew, the diversity, knowledge, innovation, skill, and talent grew right along with it. Each new resident that arrived added their unique abilities to the already plentiful pool of human resources.